They called her an angel in uniform, but no one knew that behind her smile hid a storm waiting to break. Clara Weston was 40 years old when her story began, a registered nurse living in a quiet Canadian town called Maplewood. On the outside, she looked like someone you could trust with your life. Inside, she was falling apart. Clara had spent years battling addiction, depression, and heartbreak. Her relationships failed one after another. Her job history was unstable. Life seemed to be slipping through her fingers. But in 2007, something good finally happened, or at least, that's what everyone thought. She landed a job at Meadowview Care Home, a peaceful nursing facility for the elderly. For Clara, it felt like a second chance, steady income, kind staff, and people who needed her care. For the first time in years, she felt useful again. But that peace didn't last long. Only days after she started, Clara began caring for an 87-year-old woman named Agnes, a patient with severe dementia. One evening, as Clara checked on her, she claimed she heard a voice whispering in her head. At first, she thought it was stress. But the whisper grew louder. It said things she didn't want to hear, things like, end her suffering. Clara's hands trembled as she picked up an insulin pen. Somewhere between fear and confusion, she pressed it into Agnes's skin and injected her with a dangerous dose of insulin. Then she walked away. Minutes passed. Hours. Agnes's body began to shake. Nurses rushed to her room and managed to save her, barely. Everyone assumed it was just a medical reaction. After all, Agnes had dementia and multiple illnesses. No one even looked in Clara's direction. And Clara felt something strange. Not regret, not guilt. It was power. A few weeks later, it happened again. This time, it was Mr. Harris, an elderly man with Alzheimer's who couldn't stop calling for his late wife. His cries echoed through the hallways every night. Clara claimed that same voice came back, colder, darker. So she took another insulin pen and injected him. Only this time, she doubled the dose. By morning, Mr. Harris was dead. The doctors ruled it natural causes. No one questioned Clara. No one ever did. Months later, she did it once more. Another patient, another insulin overdose, another unexplainable death. But after that, Clara suddenly stopped. Or so it seemed. Instead of killing, she started talking. One evening, she confessed to her girlfriend, casually, almost like gossip. "I've killed a couple of patients," she said softly, staring at the TV. Her girlfriend froze. "Clara, don't ever say that again. You're scaring me." That was the end of it. No police report, no investigation, just silence. A few weeks later, Clara told a nursing student the same thing, about her accidents with patients. The student panicked and threatened to report her. Clara laughed and said, "Who's going to believe you? It's your word against mine." The student never spoke up. 2 years passed, and for a while, Clara seemed calm. She was still working, still smiling, still pretending to be normal. But inside, something was waiting, something that would soon wake up again. Do you think Clara was born evil, or did her own pain turn her into a killer? Before you answer, wait till you hear what she did next. It gets darker from here. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned. 2 years had passed since Clara Weston's last incident. To everyone at Meadowview Care Home, she was just another nurse, quiet, polite, dependable. But inside, Clara was cracking. Her nights were sleepless. Her thoughts were full of guilt, fear, and strange whispers that never seemed to stop. She would sit by her window staring into the darkness, wondering if she was losing her mind or if something truly evil was haunting her. The voices had stopped for a while, but one night, as she was giving medicine to a stubborn dementia patient named Margaret, she heard it again. This time, it was louder. This time, it said her name. "Clara, she doesn't deserve to live. Do it now." Clara froze. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She tried to ignore it. She told herself she was imagining things. But the pressure in her head wouldn't stop. She reached for the insulin pen again. Her hand moved as if it wasn't hers. She injected Margaret with a high dose, and walked away without looking back. A few hours later, the old woman was dead. No one suspected foul play. After all, patients in the care home were fragile. Death was an expected visitor there. Clara went home that night shaking, but again, she felt that same twisted calm. It was like something inside her finally relaxed when someone else stopped breathing. But Clara's secret wasn't meant to stay buried forever. Sometimes, guilt makes people do strange things, like confess to the wrong person. One afternoon, During her lunch break, Clara sat in her car with Sophie, a young nursing student doing her internship. Clara smiled, bit into her sandwich, and said quietly, "You know, sometimes I wonder what would happen if people found out I killed a few patients." Sophie stared at her, waiting for her to laugh. But Clara didn't. Her face stayed still, her eyes cold and empty. Sophie dropped her sandwich. "You're joking, right?" Clara shook her head. "I help them go peacefully. I end their suffering. That's not wrong, is it?" Sophie panicked. "I'm going to tell someone." "That's not normal, Clara." Clara leaned closer, her voice sharp and calm. "No one will believe you. You're just a student, and I'm a nurse with experience." Sophie's lips trembled. She never told anyone. She finished her internship quietly and never came back to Meadowview again. Months went by. Clara continued her shifts, smiling as she handed out medicine, pretending to be an angel of mercy. But the truth was, she had become addicted. Not just to painkillers, but to control. The power of deciding who lived and who didn't had become a dark comfort. Then one cold evening in 2010, the whispers returned stronger than ever. Her new patient, Eleanor, refused to take her medicine. She was angry, shouting, and tossing things around her room. The other nurses tried to calm her, but nothing worked. When Clara walked in, the voice returned. "She's making your life miserable. End it." Her hands trembled as she drew another insulin dose. She looked into Eleanor's tired eyes and whispered, "You'll sleep peacefully tonight." By morning, Eleanor was gone. Still, no one suspected Clara. Elderly deaths were common, and Clara's medical reports always looked clean. A few weeks later, it happened again, but this time, for no reason at all. The patient, Rose, was quiet, sweet, and friendly. She never argued, never caused trouble. But that made it worse. Clara said later she just felt like it had to happen. No voices this time, only silence. She gave Rose a massive insulin overdose, turned off the light, and walked away. Rose never woke up. At this point, Clara's personal life was falling apart too. She was stealing painkillers from the drug cabinet to deal with her stress and addiction. Sometimes, she'd take them home. Sometimes, she'd steal from patients who didn't need them anymore. At first, she said it helped her function. But soon, it became a daily ritual, a little pill to quiet the guilt, another to silence the voices. Her coworkers began to notice that she seemed tired, distracted, and moody. A few even suspected she was taking something, but no one dared confront her. She was too respected, too professional on the outside. One night, after another long shift, Clara sat in her car in the parking lot, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face looked pale, hollow. "Who am I?" she whispered, but the voice in her head answered for her. "You're the one who decides. The one who sets them free." By now, Clara had killed at least 4 patients, maybe more. She had stopped counting. Her sense of guilt came and went like waves. Sometimes she cried in the shower, whispering prayers for forgiveness. Other times she smiled at her reflection, believing she was doing God's work. And yet, she knew something was coming. Every killer leaves a trail. And Clara's trail was about to catch up with her. By 2011, Clara Weston had become a ghost of herself. Her eyes looked hollow, her hands trembled when she worked, and she barely slept at night. Her addiction to painkillers had worsened, and she was stealing more drugs than ever before. But for nearly 2 years, she managed to control the voices, or maybe the voices were just waiting for the right moment to come back. That moment came in the spring of 2013. It began with small things. Clara started having panic attacks at work. She'd walk into a patient's room and suddenly hear faint whispers behind her, like someone calling her name. She'd turn, but no one was there. Soon, those whispers turned into full sentences. "They don't deserve to live. You can make it stop." She tried to drown the voices with pills, but it didn't work. One evening, she was assigned to care for Mrs. Whitman, a 90-year-old woman suffering from multiple illnesses. The old woman refused her medication, complained about pain, and shouted at Clara for being rough. The voices grew louder in Clara's head, urging her to end it. This time, Clara didn't hesitate. She filled the insulin pen with a deadly amount and injected Mrs. Whitman's arm. The woman looked at her, confused, and whispered, "Why, dear?" Clara didn't answer. She simply walked out and closed the door. A few hours later, Mrs. Whitman had a violent seizure. By the time the doctors got there, she was gone. That night, for the first time, Clara cried. Not because of what she had done, but because she was afraid of what she was becoming. Still, that fear didn't stop her. Only weeks later, she did it again, this time to a quiet patient named Louise, who wasn't even sick enough to die. Clara said the woman looked too peaceful, like she didn't belong in this world anymore. So she gave her an overdose of insulin. Louise died silently in her sleep. Clara didn't even flinch, but the murders weren't the only things haunting her. Her addiction to painkillers had taken complete control. She began to steal pills from the facility's drug supply, forging records and hiding evidence. Sometimes she'd take from living patients. Sometimes, from those who had already passed. It didn't matter anymore. The drugs made her feel untouchable, calm, numb, free from guilt. But every high was followed by a deeper fall. Her hands shook when she worked, and her coworkers began whispering about her strange behavior. A few even noticed that medication was going missing under her watch. Still, no one dared confront her directly. Clara had a reputation for being helpful and sweet, and her years of experience gave her a false image of professionalism. But beneath that fake smile, she was drowning. Each time she killed, she swore it would be her last. Each time, the voices proved her wrong. Then came one night that changed everything. It was late, almost midnight. The corridors of Meadowview were silent except for the soft beeping of machines. Clara was sitting at the nurse's station, half asleep, when she felt it again, the same strange rush that came before every killing. Her hands grew cold, her breathing quickened. In her mind, the voice whispered softly, "You know what you have to do." She stood up, picked up an insulin pen, and walked toward the patient ward. Inside, an elderly man named Arthur Dean was lying in bed, breathing heavily. He wasn't in pain. He wasn't calling for help. He was just there. Clara stood over him, staring at his face. Then, without a word, she injected him with insulin. Arthur's breathing slowed, then stopped. When his body was found hours later, no one thought twice. The cause of death was listed as natural causes. And Clara Weston, the nurse who had taken so many lives, walked away again. But her own body was beginning to betray her. Years of drug abuse had taken a toll. She was pale, dizzy, and often showed up to work smelling faintly of alcohol. She had already been suspended several times for giving patients the wrong medication, yet somehow she always managed to come back. Until 2014. That year, her luck finally ran out. After several reports of medication errors, and one incident where she gave the wrong drug entirely, Meadowview Care Home fired her. But not for murder. No one knew about that yet. They let her go because she was careless, unreliable, and suspected of substance abuse. Most people would have stopped there. Clara didn't. She found work at smaller care homes, private facilities that didn't ask many questions. And wherever she went, patients kept dying mysteriously. She killed 3 more people during that period, each one with insulin. By then, Clara had lost all sense of guilt. The killings were routine, mechanical, like part of her job. But her addiction finally caught up with her. One afternoon, a delivery of 4 large bags of painkillers arrived at the facility. Clara signed for them, then quietly took them home instead of logging them. That night, she swallowed a handful of pills, maybe too many. She woke up hours later in the hospital. She had overdosed. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the white hospital ceiling, cold, empty, lifeless. And for the first time in years, Clara felt something she hadn't felt before. Fear. When Clara Weston woke up in the hospital after her overdose, she felt as though she had come back from the edge of hell. The nurses told her she was lucky to be alive. If she'd swallowed just a few more pills, her heart would have stopped for good. Lying there, weak and trembling, she realized something she'd been ignoring for years: she couldn't keep living like this. The deaths, the drugs, the voices, it all felt like a nightmare she couldn't escape. After she was discharged, Clara checked herself into rehab. For a while, she tried to change. The counselors told her to take things one day at a time, to focus on recovery. And for a short period, it worked. But guilt has a strange way of following people like her. Even though she was surrounded by others struggling with addiction, Clara felt different. Their sins could be forgiven, hers couldn't. One night during a group therapy session, she suddenly broke down crying. "You don't understand," she said between sobs. "I've done things I can't come back from. People are dead because of me." The others stared at her, unsure if she was being dramatic or serious. Her counselor tried to calm her down, thinking it was just guilt over her addiction. No one realized she was confessing to murder. After a few weeks in rehab, Clara left, promising herself she would never go back to nursing. She wanted to disappear, maybe start over somewhere else. But the world had other plans. When she returned home, she got an unexpected call. A local school program for diabetic children was looking for a nurse to help monitor their insulin treatments. It was an easy job, good pay, few hours, no elderly patients to care for. But when Clara heard the word insulin, her stomach twisted. Memories flooded back, faces of those she had killed, the cold feel of the injection pen, the lifeless silence that followed. Still, a part of her considered it. She needed money. She needed to live. She went to the interview and sat across from the director of the program, a kind woman who smiled warmly and said, "With your experience, you'd be perfect for this position." Clara smiled back, but inside she was terrified. After the interview, she sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel. Her hands were shaking. She could almost hear the voices again whispering, "You know you'll do it again." Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "No, not this time." She didn't take the job. Instead, she decided to do something she'd never done before. She went to confess. Clara drove straight to the house of a local pastor she knew from years back. It was late, but she didn't care. She knocked on the door, and when the pastor's wife opened it, Clara looked broken, pale, trembling, eyes red from crying. "Please," she whispered, "I need to talk to someone." They invited her inside. She sat at their kitchen table, clutching a cup of tea she didn't drink. Her hands were shaking so badly that the spoon rattled against the saucer. Then she said the words that froze them both. "I killed people." The pastor frowned. "Clara, what do you mean?" She looked down at the table. "I injected them, with insulin. My patients. They died. All of them." The room went silent. The pastor and his wife looked at each other, unsure if she was telling the truth or having some kind of breakdown. "Clara," the pastor said gently, "have you told anyone else?" "No," she said. "No one believes me. No one ever does." The pastor sighed deeply. He didn't know what to do. Reporting her could destroy her life, but doing nothing could mean more people dying. After a long pause, he said quietly, "We'll pray for you. But, Clara, if you ever hurt anyone again, I'll have to go to the police." Clara nodded. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I don't want to do it anymore. I swear I don't." They prayed together that night, and she left before midnight. The pastor and his wife sat in silence long after she was gone. They didn't report her. They convinced themselves she was exaggerating, or that the guilt was twisting her memories. But they were wrong. Months passed. Clara stayed out of nursing for a while, but she couldn't keep herself away from hospitals forever. It was the only world she knew. Eventually, she found work again, this time at a private home, caring for an elderly woman. The family trusted her completely. Clara smiled, cooked, cleaned, and gave medication as usual. But the urges came back. One evening, while preparing the woman's insulin dose, she felt her mind go blank. Her hand tightened around the pen. The next morning, her patient was dead. Clara sat beside the body for nearly an hour, silent, staring at what she'd done. When the coroner listed it as cardiac failure, she almost laughed. It was too easy. By now, Clara's life was collapsing completely. She was broke, unstable, and heavily dependent on painkillers. The voice in her head, whether it was guilt or something darker, never stopped talking. She started isolating herself, ignoring friends and family. Every night, she'd sit in her apartment in total silence, the sound of the refrigerator humming and the ticking clock being the only reminders that time hadn't stopped. She knew she couldn't hide forever. She just didn't know when the truth would finally catch her. By the time Clara turned 38, she had become a ghost of herself. Her once smooth skin was now pale, and her eyes carried the look of someone who hadn't slept peacefully in years. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw their faces, her husband, his mistress, the other women, staring back at her in silence. The weight of her crimes had eaten away every part of her soul. Even her patients noticed. She was no longer the cheerful nurse they used to know. Some said she looked haunted. Others whispered that she was cursed. Then one Sunday morning, she did something no one expected. She walked into a small church in the next town, far away from where anyone knew her. She knelt before the altar, her hands trembling, and whispered, "God, I can't carry this anymore." The pastor noticed her and came closer. "My daughter," he said gently, What troubles your heart? Tears rolled down Clara's cheeks. Everything I touch dies, she whispered. And it's my fault. The pastor's face stiffened, unsure if she was speaking metaphorically or confessing to something deeper. But when she continued, his doubt vanished. I killed them, she said softly. One by one. My husband. The women he cheated with. I made sure they all paid. The pastor's body went cold. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He tried to compose himself. You killed them. Yes, she whispered again. With the same hands I used to heal others. He stared at her, frozen in disbelief. He had heard confessions of theft, adultery, and betrayal, but never murder. Not like this. Clara wept uncontrollably. I didn't mean to do it all at first, she said between sobs. But once I started, I couldn't stop. It felt like justice, until it became something darker. The pastor sat in silence. What was he supposed to do? He was bound by spiritual duty to protect confessions, yet he knew the weight of this one could not stay hidden. When the service ended, he went into his office, trembling. He opened his Bible, but his eyes couldn't focus. Every verse blurred into guilt. Lord, what do I do? He muttered. That night, he couldn't sleep. He prayed, he paced, he cried. He knew that keeping her secret could make him an accomplice in the eyes of God and the law. 2 days later, he made a decision. He walked into the nearest police station, still in his clerical collar, and said, I need to report something. It's about a confession I received. A woman, she said she killed several people. The officers were shocked. They took his statement seriously, but because of the sensitivity, they needed proof. Can you identify her? One asked. The pastor hesitated, gripping his Bible tighter. Her name is Clara. She's a nurse at St. David's Hospital. That was all it took. The next morning, detectives arrived at the hospital. They watched her closely, her movements, her behavior, her calmness. When they confronted her, Clara didn't fight. She didn't even ask why. She simply nodded and said, I knew this day would come. At the station, she confessed again, this time officially. I did it, she said, almost with relief. I killed them all. The news spread like wildfire. Nurse of death arrested, the headlines read. People who once admired her now recoiled in horror. Her coworkers couldn't believe it. Some defended her, saying she was incapable of such evil. Others remembered strange coincidences, the patients who died too soon, the relatives who fell mysteriously ill. The trial became one of the most talked about cases in the region. Every seat in the courtroom was filled, every day. Reporters from across the country came to cover it. When Clara took the stand, she didn't cry or beg. She spoke softly, as if she were reading her own obituary. I thought I was punishing sin, she said. But I was only destroying myself. The judge looked at her, deeply disturbed. You took life into your own hands, he said. You played God, and for that, you will face justice. The courtroom fell silent. You could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan as he read her sentence. Life imprisonment, no parole. Clara bowed her head and whispered, maybe now I'll finally rest. But peace wouldn't come easily. Even behind bars, she woke up at night hearing voices, whispers of the dead, calling her name. Sometimes, she'd see faces in her dreams, smiling faintly before fading into darkness. Years passed, but her story lived on. She became a haunting legend, a warning that evil doesn't always wear a monster's face. Sometimes, it wears a nurse's smile. 10 years after Clara's sentencing, the story of the Angel of Mercy killer still sent chills through anyone who heard it. Her name became a warning whispered among nurses, doctors, and even pastors, a story of how pain can twist love into something unspeakable. But the world hadn't forgotten her. In fact, one man wanted answers, a young journalist named David Orden, who had grown up hearing about her case. He wanted to know, what turns a healer into a murderer? After months of writing letters, Clara finally agreed to meet him. The day he entered the prison, the air felt heavy. The guards led him through the echoing corridors until he reached the visitation room. There, sitting on the other side of the glass, was Clara. Older now, frail, her once dark hair streaked with gray. But her eyes, calm and sharp, still held that eerie stillness people remembered. David sat down, pressed the recorder button, and said softly, "Thank you for agreeing to see me, Ms. Clara." She gave a faint smile. "You want to know why I did it, don't you?" "Yes," David said. "People still talk about you. Some say you were a monster. Others say you were broken. Which one is true?" Clara chuckled bitterly. Monster or broken woman, maybe both. I didn't start out evil. I was a wife, a nurse, a believer. But betrayal can poison a heart faster than cyanide. David leaned closer. Do you regret it? For a moment, she said nothing. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where faint sunlight filtered through iron bars. I regret not walking away, she said. But I don't regret what I learned. Pain reveals who we really are. I learned that forgiveness is harder than murder. David's chest tightened. And the others, the innocent ones who died along the way. Clara's lips trembled. No one is truly innocent, she whispered. Some were guilty of pride. Some of deceit. Some of simply being in my way. David's eyes widened. So you believed you were delivering justice? I believed it, she said softly. Until justice became addiction, I started to feel powerful. Every time someone died, the world grew quieter. But it never lasted. Her fingers tapped the table slowly, a rhythm of guilt. David studied her for a long moment. Why tell me all this now? She looked at him, her eyes distant. Because my story isn't about killing, she said. It's about what happens when you stop forgiving. When love turns to vengeance, even angels fall. The guard signaled their time was up. David turned off the recorder, his mind spinning. As he stood, Clara added quietly. Tell them, I wasn't always a killer. I was someone who loved too much, and lost herself trying to make the pain stop. 2 weeks later, Clara was found dead in her cell, a silent passing in the middle of the night. No signs of struggle, no suicide note, just a calm expression on her face, as if she'd finally found peace. Her death brought the story full circle. The woman who once held life and death in her hands died with none left to take. David's article titled, The Angel's Confession, became one of the most read stories of the year. Readers across the world were haunted by her final words, words that blurred the line between victim and villain. And though Clara's body was buried quietly, her story lived on, a chilling reminder that sometimes, the most dangerous monsters aren't born. They're made. If you found this story chilling, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories that uncover the darkest sides of human nature. Turn on notifications so you never miss a case that will make you question everything you thought you knew about good and evil.